This webinar is ideally designed for individuals that have maybe just have maybe just taken on the role of RSHE or PSHE lead in their school. It might well be designed for individuals who haven't simply had the headspace or time at school to look at this until now. We totally understand that. It's very, very fast paced at secondary schools. So if that is you today, we hope that you're going to come away today feeling reassured that we have essentially got so many things in place for you that's going to make your life a lot easier to be ready for September. So we have looked at, I have been a PSHE lead myself, so we do know actually what is helpful and what ways we can cut corners for you, but also maintain that quality that you're really aspiring to also in your school. In terms of what we're going to be looking at today, if you did attend our September and January webinars, you might find this useful as a way of almost auditing and checking that you've done everything that you need to do for September. But we will be repeating quite a lot of the content that we looked at in our September and January webinars. So the level of depth, it is only quite a short webinar today because it is essentially designed to gear you up and point you in the right direction as to where you can find certain materials and support. In terms of that level of depth you might be wanting to, we will be signposting throughout our webinar today towards other webinars and training that you might find really useful as an RSHE or PSHE lead. Thank you, Eleni. So my name is Bethan Hall. I'm the 11 to 16 programme lead. So if you do have any questions and they're specific towards the actual programme itself, if you do contact Jigsaw, our school support team, and you want it to come through to me, please do ask for Bethan, and those emails will be forwarded to myself. Essentially, I've been very heavily involved in the writing of the programme and the management of the programme, and also ensuring that PSHE leads are supported in the transition to these new materials as well. So it's very likely I know a lot of the answers to the questions you may have and can support you. So no question is a silly question. Please do feel free to contact me if you have any. Thank you. So today we're going to be looking at, to begin with, we'll just look at what's changed from the 2019 guidance and what is new in the 2026 guidance. We won't be delving really into the depths of it, but we will be just due to time restrictions today, but we will be looking at what are the themes that we can find new in the 2026 guidance that wasn't in the 2019 guidance. What I can tell you is we've done a real deep dive and comparison of the two 2019 and 2026. Nothing from the 2019 has been taken out. There is simply additional content added in. So you do need to maybe consider the time available that you have in your curriculum to make space for some of these new topics that you now need to be talking about with your young people. Key timelines and deadlines. So we'll be looking at statutory deadlines, so what has to be achieved, and essentially this is from September 2026. We'll be looking at also what you need to have done between now and September, moving across to that new DfE guidance in terms of transitioning, consultation with parents, and also consultation with governors as well. We'll be looking at curriculum design. So looking at how these new topics might look in our scheme when we're looking at age and stage appropriate content, and how the spiral approach that you can find within our scheme. So whilst we know there's a lot of content, and it's very easy, I think, for PSHE leads to panic and use it almost as a tick box, have we covered this in our scheme? You do also have to consider that spiral approach, which we've done for you. So making sure that you're not just delivering this as a one-off topic, and you're considering the skills that are needed to then maybe deliver these more sensitive topics. We'll look at sensitive topics. The guidance does state that you now need to discuss in your policies how you are going to address sensitive questions, and that's really important because our teachers do need this. They do need to have the training in this area, and also the guidance as to how do I deal with this situation if it were to occur. Parental engagement. So we'll look at, again, we'll signpost you to areas that you might find useful. We've done a lot of work in this area. in terms of presentations you can utilise with your parents, and also looking at what can they withdraw from and what can't they withdraw from. And right near the end, we'll then give you an action plan. So essentially a checklist. So we're hoping that's going to, for a lot of you, will probably reassure that there's things in place that you already have in place, but also highlight, okay, what do I need to do before September? Thank you. So the new DfE guidance came out in July last year, and we've been working really hard since then to ensure that schools have their new the new programme aligned with the new guidance. We have had it updated actually since December, the end of December 2025, and this wasn't necessarily to pressure schools into teaching this new guidance. We did it with that time frame in mind, so that schools have got time to have a look at the new materials, decide whether there's any areas in school that they might want to provide support with in CPD, with the staff that are delivering those more sensitive topics. There's very much, I would say, more sensitive topics than in the 2019 guidance, and certainly some areas that staff may well want support with. So you are in a position now to have a look on the portal if you haven't done so yet at the new scheme. You'll see that there's two. At the minute, we have our 2019 programme, and right underneath it with a banner that says 2026 is our 2026 programme, and obviously it's a 2026 you need to be referring to, ready for September. Schools can start to implement this new guidance and the new content if they wish to earlier. We know majority of schools aren't doing that. Majority are waiting to September and ensuring that before you do this, you need to ensure your consultation is complete, policies are updated, and staff feel confident and comfortable with that material that they're delivering too. Of course, there's also links to legal obligations and other statutory documentation, such as the KCSIE document that's been released as well this year, and our programmes align with this updated guidance too. Thank you. So what has changed? These are some of the key themes you can find within our 11 to 16 programme. Of course, there are many more changes than this, but these are, if I have to summarise it down into some of the key themes you may have heard talked about in the media or amongst your staff room, these are some of the key themes you can see. So initially, reducing violence against women and girls. This isn't necessarily explicitly talked about in the scheme itself in terms of women and girls and violence against women and girls. It is the DfE guidance, I suppose, inexplicitly looks at it in terms of what is a healthy relationship, what's unhealthy behaviours, and domestic abuse generally as well. And also the power in relationships too. There's some examples of how this topic is addressed within the DfE guidance as well, without necessarily villainising men themselves. So tackling misogynistic views. So looking at topics such as positive masculinity, for example, looking at incel culture, that's new within the guidance. Online harms, and I'm going to expand on this area in a minute. We know since 2019, the world we live in, or our young people certainly live in today, is a very different world to 2019, particularly with the introduction of more advanced social media platforms and AI, for example. This is a very expanded area. Mental health and well-being, there's expanded areas in here. The main difference we'd see here would be the language that is used surrounding this topic. So I think they've made it very clear that whilst we need to be talking about mental health conditions and disorders, what we also need to be talking about is that having a change in mood is also to be expected, particularly in teenagehood. And that feelings of anxiety and feelings of low mood are also part of I suppose your development in adolescence too. So having that distinguished difference is also very clear in the guidance when we're talking about these areas. Resilience and developing independence. So personal safety itself is a brand new topic from primary through to secondary, and this developing independence is woven through that scheme essentially. So we've got within our programme and with the guidance, it really states areas such as travel, transport are some examples as to where we need to be looking at personal safety too. Thank you. So just to expand on the digital developments in the DfE guidance, I'm not going to go through all of these, but essentially, as you can see here, and I'm sure you can have a little read of these are some of the new or newer or developed topics that can be found within the new DfE guidance. Some of these may have been talked about in some way previously, and we know that actually schools, even though they wasn't necessarily in the 2019 guidance, we know schools have been talking about this in classrooms anyway. But it's great to see now that this is actually in the guidance and recognises some of the pressures and some of the safeguarding issues that we have surrounding online wellbeing itself. Thank you. So other areas that are new or I would say strengthened, I've already mentioned online safety and harmful online content. This is to be integrated throughout all year groups in obviously an age and stage appropriate way. Harmful sexual behaviour between peers, there's a clear expectation there. Consent, the wording's very interesting in the new guidance because it's very clear that what you also need to be talking about is going into that, I suppose, further level of depth about what we mean by consent. So rather than just saying no means no and yes means yes, looking at the ethics behind, does a yes always mean a yes, and is it ethically right just because someone said yes? So the ethics surrounding consent are very much delved into in a lot more depth, I would say. So it's really important you're having a look at the lessons you may have had in consent if you're not a Jigsaw school today, and consider, is that level of depth really addressed in that way? Intimate image abuse and deep fakes, so there's new content there for secondary. LGBT relationships addressed in an inclusive and age appropriate way. There's not a huge change in this area, but I feel like the wording and the guidance is a little bit more clearer. There are also links with, when it comes to gender identity and gender questioning, the links with the KCSIE document there. So take a look at both of those. The wording's very specific as to how we should be addressing this in schools. So it's very important you're taking a look at that. We, of course, have adapted our lessons to ensure it still meets this, but if you're, again, not a Jigsaw school looking today at this webinar, make sure you look very carefully at the wording of that guidance. And then menstrual health is looked at in a lot more depth, I would say. There are other areas such as endometriosis, as an example there, that are discussed and we now need to be talking about with our young people and supporting them with. In terms of what stays the same, RSHE and health education both now remain statutory. At secondary, right to withdraw from secondary sex education is... repeat that sentence. At secondary, students can withdraw from sex education only, but not relationships or health education. And that remains the same. The guidance in that area does remain the same. And I'll be making the guidance in that, just to recap on that. In a few slides' time, I'll just be looking at that again and just making that clearer. Schools must publish their RSHE policy on their website. That remains the same. And governors must approve and review the RSHE policy. And it also must be available for parents to consult with and have a look at that before it becomes final also. Thank you. Now, the guidance also states what I would call optional content. So the wording here is that from the DfE guidance, schools may also choose, so it is a choice here for schools, to teach about issues which are not listed in the secondary curriculum content, including, so these are the areas they're specifically talking about here, suicide prevention, self-harm and eating disorders. So there's very specific guidance on here. And just because it's listed, I would really, really strongly urge that you consider the needs of your school, consider whether your staff are ready for this particular content, and also that you've got all of your safeguarding elements surrounding this topic. So even after the lesson, making sure those clear pathways are very clear after delivering this content. So the guidance states that initially there must be really high quality materials which are evidence-based, are expertly written as well, requires safety. The specialist areas do require safety and sensitivity as well as signposting. Before any teachers delivering these topics in a classroom, there must be high quality evidence-based staff training. And again, expert-led training too. And then in terms of prepared disclosures, I mentioned previously, making sure that there's a follow-up after this, an opportunity after the session for disclosures to be managed sensitively and using the correct pathways. And that staff are equipped for that as well, equipped for those possible discussions or disclosures. And also consult professionals. Language and content has to be accurate, and it also must be age appropriate. Now, one thing I would state, and I know the PSHE Association are in discussions with the DfE on this area, is whilst they've stated that we do need that there's this expert and evidence-based training must be in place and this expert and evidence-based materials must be utilised, what it doesn't do is highlight who or what is an expert in this area, or any necessarily signpost to anywhere specifically. So, consider whether this is something you want to deliver straight away, or if it's something you'd like to maybe see whether maybe the DfE produce any further guidance in this area. And I do think it's something you need to really closely and consider, I would say, particularly with whether your staff feel comfortable and confident in this area too. Thank you, Eleni. Okay, so in terms of key dates, so this is looking at where we're at. So really, I say spring, summer term, maybe that's quite optimistic, but summer term, between now and the end of the year, which I appreciate if you're a state school, for most of you, it'd be 3 weeks. So I appreciate this might be a bit overwhelming, but ideally this is what needs to take place. We know this isn't necessarily going to be achievable for all schools, but ideally this is what we'd like to be seeing happening. So initially review your current PSHE or RSHE curriculum against the new guidance, identify gaps across Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, and then brief SLT on governors about what needs to be done to make sure that your new curriculum from September is in line with the new guidance. If, of course, you are a Jigsaw school, that has been done for you. We have mapped against the new guidance. Everything is there with the new mapping and RSHE guidance as well. But we know that even those schools that are Jigsaw schools, sometimes they like to adapt our materials to suit their needs, or deliver it in a way that is 2 30-minute sessions. For example, there may well be work you might want to do to ensure that it's woven in a way that suits your needs as well. But yeah, it's initially that is your first step. Your next step is to then revise policy and schemes. So update your RSHE policy, or rewrite or adapt your scheme of work. And then it's very important that after you've drafted your RSHE policy, that you consult with governors and parents before the final draft is published. That final draft has to be on your website by September, prior to obviously when you're delivering from September. Some schools, September the 2nd or 3rd, I would assume. In terms of the RSHE policy, we have got for our Jigsaw schools policy audits, we have got policy templates, we have got webinars on how to update your policy if you just want to tweak it, and we have documentation to support. If I was in your shoes, I would go straight and have a look at the policy template to begin with, because you might find actually a lot of the work has been done for you. We're here to really support you, not necessarily replace, but we know that there are areas that we can support and make your lives easier as PSHE leads. So you can take a good look at maybe areas that you maybe need further, you can take your time on other areas, for example. Staff training and CPD. Of course, between now and the end of term, it might be unlikely that you're in a position to put in CPD, but you can certainly be looking at, if you've got those inset days in September, are there any areas that we need to be prioritising, particularly on the new content? Or it might simply be that you want to utilise, we have on our website, if you're a Jigsaw school, some slides on updating them as to what's new in the guidance. That might be a great start for some schools to have a little look at what's new in the programme too. So we have got some documents, and we also have got some webinars, and it's also some staff presentation slides that are there to support you if that's the first step you might want to take. I will be delving into that area later on in our webinar today too. And then from September, that's obviously when we expect to have that new full implementation in place of the new DfE guidance, policy published, staff feeling confident as to what's in that new guidance as well, and resources and materials ready to go. Thank you. So in terms of what the guidance also states, it makes it very clear that this needs to be a spiral approach. And what we mean by that is not just ticking it off once and saying, right, we've talked about, for example, SDIs in one lesson, making sure that those skills and that knowledge is built in an age and stage appropriate way. And this, I'm not going to go into depth here, but these are some examples as to how you would see Key Stage 3 content then be built upon in age and stage appropriate way from Key Stage 3 through to Key Stage 4. Now, in terms of what's taught when in age and stage appropriate way, all of our lessons are delivered by what the research tells us. So we base, for example, our pornography content on what does the research tell us in terms of when young people are exposed to this. What skills do they need? And how are they exposed to this? This is one example. So it's all research and evidence based in terms of how we tackle maybe some of these more sensitive topics as well. Thank you, Eleni. Moving on to handling sensitive topics itself, it's really important, because this new guidance is in place, that you are having a visit of this area with your staff that are delivering these topics. So, for example, as a teacher or as a PSHE lead having this conversation with teachers, you need to set and revisit those ground rules at the start of every RSHE lesson. Now, we have got what we call a jigsaw charter, but if you might want to adapt, which is essentially a list of expectations on both the teacher and the students that creates that safe learning environment. You might want to adapt those. You may want to have a look at those and go, actually, we'd like to create our own as a school. Or if you've got a particular topic that needs additional rules setting, you may want to implement those and have a little look to make sure you're really creating that safe learning environment. Use distancing techniques. This has been done for you in our jigsaw materials already. But if you aren't using jigsaw materials, have a little, assess and review the content you've got to ensure that these distancing techniques examples I've shown here are shown there. Know your referral pathway and your DSL contact before every lesson to make sure that you're reiterating to your PSHE leads who they can go to if there is a disclosure maybe in a lesson. Don't promise confidentiality. Now, we do have a rule in our jigsaw charter which states that when we say privacy, it isn't necessarily privacy in terms of a teacher sharing information with other teachers or with parents if it's deemed appropriate. What we mean by that is what is said in a classroom is generally stays in a classroom, so that those conversations on the playground remain age and stage appropriate. But of course, it's very important to make it clear to students that if there is a safeguarding issue, that the teacher would need to pass that on. Respond to disclosures calmly and follow up your DSL immediately. Use factual, inclusive, non-judgmental language at times, and debrief with a colleague or PSHE lead after difficult lessons as well. That last one's very important, and I think you need to, as a PSHE lead, having that conversation at the beginning of the year where the support is should that teacher feel they need it. Because at the end of the day, these are the people that are going to be standing in front of our young people having these difficult discussions at times as well. And they may well need some support and need that feeling of backing as well at times too. Topics that might require that extra care are, and I've listed some examples here. There are more, because we do have, if you're a jigsaw school, we do have on our first or second slide, a disclaimer which highlights this is a sensitive topic. You may want to review the lesson prior. So these are some examples of topics that might require extra care. Of course, you may also want to add in topics such as FGM too, around here too. We don't have any lessons that specifically look at self-harm, eating disorders or suicide in our schemes. We do cover these in other ways, and we have some webinars coming up that will be discussing that, particularly when it comes to suicide prevention, but there is no explicit lesson looking at these. Thank you. So in terms of parental engagement, just to reiterate, because if you're a new PSHE, new PSHE lead, I don't want to assume that you are, in the know. There's a lot to learn in a short space of time if you are new to the role. So there is no right to withdraw from relationships education or health education. There is a right to withdraw from sex education at secondary in writing. And then in terms of you must publish RSHE, your RSHE policy on the school website, and governors must approve. Now, in terms of what is sex education, what is relationships education, there are some very grey areas, I would say. The DfE guidance does support some of those, I suppose, does give some indication of some of those grey areas now being deemed relationship education and not sex education. So sextortion, for example, there. But we have got, if you're a Jigsaw school, a document which highlights what we at Jigsaw would deem as sex education. And you may well want to use that as your starting point. We have erred on the side of caution, I would say, maybe, than some other schools, but this is simply to maybe address schools that might want to make sure that they're fully covered, and because some of the areas are quite subjective, I would say. So pornography, for example, some schools may deem it as sex education if it's delivered in a certain way, but others may not. Take a look at that document and decide whether you might want to take that same approach and the same wording as us in terms of what is sex education. But within your policy, you must also state what your understanding or definition of sex education is, and how parents can view those sex education materials, and how they can opt out as well, what those processes are. You ideally, and this isn't isn't in the DfE guidance that you must do it this way, but ideally having an information evening with parents is very useful. I know from speaking to PSHE leads, this is often done, not always, as parents come in and we'll discuss RSHE, because from talking to schools, the uptake isn't always as high as they'd like in terms of the number of parents coming. Other ways you could utilise this is by having a stand on a certain evening. For example, if you've got a parents' evening, you could have a stand where you have your policy and you open those conversations and you provide access for them to have a look at the materials and open those conversations as well. That is another approach you might want to utilise as a way of engaging. Having clear communication. So we have got at Jigsaw our snapshot overviews, which can be shared with parents. It shows them what is covered within certain age groups, topic-wise. We also have a parent portal, which is a way that parents can access the materials and have a look at those at home too. Thank you. Okay, so in terms of action points, these are your next steps. So this term, you need to download and read the updated DfE RSHE statutory guidance. And I know I've looked at some of this already. Audit this against the new secondary requirements. Map it. And again, all of this has been done if you're a Jigsaw school. Identify staff's EPD needs, especially online harms, harmful sexual behaviours and consent as three particular areas there to identify. Draft updated RSHE policy for SLT and governors to review, and then brief the head teacher and governors, if they're not the ones that are writing this policy, the head teacher, on timeline and requirements. Of course, we need to make it clear this needs to be ready by September implementation, or before ideally. And then before September also, deliver staff training if you have time. If not, plan this in for your first autumn term. And then update the schemes accordingly. Hold parents' information evening and gather feedback. If you're not in a position to do this before the end of term, make it clear when in the autumn term you're going to be doing this as an opportunity. Obtain governor sign-off on the updated RSHE policy, and then publish this on your website. And also establish that annual review cycle that when you're going to be monitoring that the policy itself. Thank you. Now, I've said a lot today, and I couldn't possibly be in a position to share everything with you in one go. So we have got two materials that we're going to share with you. This will be coming out on an email after today's webinar. These are essentially, we have two versions. We've got one which is for Jigsaw schools and one which is for schools that aren't Jigsaw. And it's essentially steps that are going to help you get ready for September. And as you can see, the areas that are underlined are where you can access the links to, for example, a webinar, or it might be an area on the portal that's got parent consultation, PowerPoint slides online. So there's some examples there of maybe an easy way of you to go, this is the area I need to look at. Okay, what can Jigsaw support me with? And it's all really clearly mapped out there for you. Of course, Jigsaw schools will have access to that bit more. It's a bit more bespoke to the Jigsaw programme, but we have got things that are available for our non-Jigsaw schools as well. Thank you, Eleni. And I mentioned CPD. We have got lots and lots of webinars that are recorded on both the Knowledge Hub online, on our online website, but also for those Jigsaw schools, we have got that little bit more on the community area of the portal. And essentially, these are just some examples. So it might well be you want to have a bit more of a dive into what has changed. It might well be that you want to look at a webinar that looks at, okay, what has changed in the Jigsaw scheme itself. And that would be our January webinar, the first one on the list there, with my lovely face in the pink. And then it might well be that you want to just look at policy. So that would be the bottom right corner webinar. It may well be, so Sarah Bruff, I want to say I was on that. I think it was yourself, actually, Eleni Moore. But Sarah Bruff led a webinar on RSHE changes explained for governors. This is designed in a way that can be shared. That link could be shared with your governors. So if you want to find a really quick win and you're at the minute in a position where you got a lot to do in a short amount of time, a really quick win would be to share that recording or that clip with your governors to keep them in line, or up to date, should I say. And then finally, we have a series of 3 different webinars. One looked at, for example, AI. One looked at pornography and the updates in that area from the DfE guidance. And one looked at misogyny and challenging misogyny and creating a whole school approach to positive masculinity. That's another webinar. So we've got lots and lots of things. Please keep an eye out on our website, but also on our community area for things that's going to support your teachers. Thank you. Okay, so have we got any questions? I'll have a look at the chat now. Please do pop those in the chat now if you have any questions. That would be really helpful. I can now take an opportunity to have a look at those.
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat at the moment.
No, nothing at the minute.
I guess I just wanted to reinforce that all of the webinars that you just shared are available, open to everybody through the Knowledge Hub on our website. So you can share the links to those, as Bethan said, to different audiences as well. So yeah, please do utilize those. Also, if you want if no question comes to mind now, but it does later on, you can get in touch with our school support team. So that's schoolsupport@jigsaweducationgroup.com. And you can also use that as well, or go through our website. If you're not a Jigsaw school, but you're interested in finding out more, then yeah, you can contact us through our website or again through the school support address. But yeah, thank you so much, Beth. I think that was a really great whistle stop kind of tour, really clear in terms of next steps. And we will follow up with an email which will have the recording from this session in it, and also the roadmap that Bethan indicated.
Lovely.
Fabulous.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.